He honors those who fear the Lord. The fear of the Lord, as we know in Proverbs 1:7, is one who is wise. But here, it kind of tacks onto that, right? The one who's wise fears the Lord, but one who honors is also one who is wise. He's a, quote unquote, a soldier of honor. Protects others. He looks to the needs of others. But look at this third line. He swears to his own hurt and does not change. So immediately you might see here the word swear and think, aren't we commanded not to swear? But here it's kind of different. It's not the swearing that abuses God. It's also not the type of swearing that abuses God's law. It is the type of swearing that is connected with the Hebrew words le-ho-amir, which symbolizes a personal vow with God, saying that with my own life, I will look to the needs of others. With my own life, I will seek to be a man of God and not change. That is the type of vow he's making. It is an oath. It is a promise to God that he will keep his promises. You see that type of swearing or oathing with the presidential oath. It goes something like this. I do solemnly swear when the president is inaugurated as the president that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and do to the best of my ability to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Obviously here, the president is not committing a sin by swearing and making an oath. It is simply a promise. And let me tell you, this godly man makes quite a promise, because he is bound to that promise even to his own detriment, even to his own pain. Let me give you a good example. Mitsuo Fushida is a captain of the Japanese planes that went to bomb Pearl Harbor. He was the one who was over the PA system and said, "Tora, Tora, Tora!" And immediately the Japanese bombers flew over Pearl Harbor and dropped the bombs on U.S. soil. He was hated by the Americans. He went back to Japan. He survived the attack. But he also left because he saw what he did was wrong and he had a conscience. But during his journey away from Japan, he met an American POW who sacrificed his life to lead him to Jesus. And so Fushida decided that his heart was still burdened for his country, but this time not as a soldier of honor, but as a traitor. Because when he went back, he did not only take himself back to Japan, but he took a westernized religion, which Japan, when he looked upon Fushida, they really hated him. They're like, "Why are you coming back?" But Fushida took the risk and died for his faith and shared the gospel with the entire island of Japan, even unto death. That is a man of integrity. That is the type of guy that God calls his golden eye, because God loves that type of man. See, point number one, a godly man does not only desire to live in character, he does not only desire to live with proper communication and conduct. Point number three, he does not only desire to live honorably and humbly, but point number four, he also desires to give freely and to live justly. Look at verse 5. He does not put out his money at an interest, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things will never be shaken. This is awesome, because he not only shows it in character and how he communicates and how his conduct is and how he lives honorably and how he lives humbly, but he also is a faithful steward with his money and how he handles it. Actually, if you look at Leviticus 25, verses 35 through 38, it says this is actually a Levitical law. It says, "In a case of a countryman of yours who becomes poor and his means with regard to you falter, then you are to sustain him like a stranger or a sojourner, that he may live with you. Do not take you serious interest from him, but revere your God, that your countrymen may live with you. You shall not give him your silver at interest, nor shall you give him food for gain. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, to give you the land of Canaan, and to be your God. To be your God. See, this is the type of man, when he gives money, he doesn't expect interest. He doesn't expect you to give him more back. He expects you to give back, but he doesn't force it upon you. And he doesn't trick you. There's no malicious intent when he gives. But he does not only do that, but if you look at the next line, he does not take a bribe against the innocent. And so where does that come from? Well, it's another law. Deuteronomy 16:19-20 says this: You shall not distort justice. You shall not be partial. And you shall not take a bribe. For a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts the words of the righteous. Justice, and only justice shall you pursue, that you may live and possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you. See, you can almost summarize that in verse 5. This is a man of the law. He keeps it. Not only does he keep it, but he is compassionate about it. When he gives without expecting interest. And when he judges friends and when he looks upon his peers, he doesn't take a bribe. He judges justly. He is a man who tells you the truth. He won't lie to you. There's no darkness shrouding him. He lives his life completely in transparency. That's unlike Samson, right? Samson is a man who showed enmity towards his friends. Samson is a man who basically gave away his wife. Samson was a man who was a bad judge of character. He chose Delilah, and Delilah would be the woman who would trick him. And so Samson was not a man who gave freely. He was not a type of man who lived justly, because he couldn't gauge people's character. And so don't be a bad judge of character. But there's one more line in this verse, verse 5, that I believe is the kicker and makes this passage so powerful. So listen intently. Look at the third line. He who does these things will never be shaken. There's something interesting here about that verse. Because we know in Psalm chapter 14, verse 1, it says, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God, that they are corrupt and they have committed abominable deeds. Look at the universal affirmative he makes, the last line of verse 1. There is no one who does good. There's an apparent contradiction here. Because how can one who cannot do good be one whose rock will never be shaken? There is an apparent contradiction. Obviously, David himself cannot attain to this. We cannot attain to this. Actually, if you go to chapter 13 in his lament, in verse 14, he actually uses a different language. He says, my enemy will say, I have overcome him being David, and my adversaries will rejoice when I am shaken. See, David obviously knows that he is shaken at his bootstraps. He is fearful. He lives a life of fear, but there is something he's pointing forward to. And if we just take Psalm chapter 15 on its own, we will be missing the point. Look with me at Psalm chapter 16, verse 7. It says this, I will bless the Lord who has counseled me. Indeed, my mind instructs me in the night. Verse 8, I have set the Lord continually before me, because he is at my right hand. Repetition, I will not be shaken. Therefore, my heart is glad, and my glory rejoices, and my flesh also will dwell securely. For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol. Who's you? Who is he talking about? Nor will you allow your Holy One to undergo decay. Again, who is you? Verse 11, you will make known to me the path of life, and in your presence is fullness of joy. In your right hand there are pleasures forever. I will make this stance that David, verse 7 to 11, is pointing forward to Jesus. And if you look at verse 15, and you look at chapter 15 and chapter 14 and chapter 13, you will see apparent contradictions, because obviously there is no man good enough. But by the grace of Christ, there is hope. By the grace of Christ. And let me say this. When you pursue Christ and you seek His holiness and character, you will never be shaken. Because David understood this. He understood it. Because how then could he say a godly man who should dwell on His holy hill should desire to live in character, should desire to live with proper communication and conduct, should desire to live honorably and humbly, and should desire to give freely and live justly if Jesus is not in the picture? And obviously, David knew something is coming. Let me rephrase that. David knew someone is coming. And it's none other than Jesus. Man, what a hope we have in Jesus. Ephesians 15:1-2 says this. And Paul challenges us. It says, therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love, just as Christ also loved you and gave Himself up for us, an offering and a sacrifice to God as a fragrant aroma. See, you can only walk with God because Christ loved us first. We can only take the challenge to be the man of integrity, to be God's golden eye, to be a woman of God, because Christ stood in our place. And because Christ stood in our place, we can live this way. We can live in such a powerful way so that one day we have a future promise and we can dwell on that holy hill with God. So you might ask me, so what? What am I supposed to do? Some of you may have a card. It looks like this. I want you to take a challenge. I'm going to call this the four-wheel realignment. And some of you know something about cars or may not know about cars. But when you go to the shop and you're driving down the road and you notice your car kind of swerving to the right, even though you leave the steering wheel straight, it's because your treads are wearing out. And so mechanics always tell you that you should realign your wheels every 30,000 to 60,000 miles or so, because because of all the brakes on the road kind of affects your wheels. And so you need to realign those wheels. Well, I know all of us love Jesus. I know all of us have experienced the grace of Christ. So I want you to take a challenge with me. And I will do this as well. 4 challenges I want you to do. Find a friend. If you're not married, go to your best friend. Call him up and say, hey, I need to ask you some questions. If you're married, go to your husband. Go to your wife. Okay, ask these 4 questions. Number 1, have I walked with integrity? Have I worked righteously and spoken truthfully before you? If they say yes, ask how or why. Question number 2, have I had an encouraging tongue? Have I been compassionate in my correction? And if they say yes, say how and why. Question number 3, have I been a soldier of honor and humility before my friends, before my peers, before my enemies, and especially before you? Question number 4, and this hits home. So you have a wife or a spouse who knows that you handle money. Have I been a faithful steward to give out of my abundance and to be a good judge of character? Ask those 4 questions. With Psalms chapter 15, read it with your husband, read it with your friend, and talk about it. But ask these 4 questions. Go through it. Because you as well as I, we want to be the best that we can be.